Hello everyone, welcome back. We're a little late with this video, haven't seen you for a while, but it's been summer here, although you wouldn't think it today. And strangely enough, time just flew by. Anyway, it gave chance for some bits and pieces to arrive for the Indian, and for me to scratch my head and think a bit more about things on the special. So, as you saw from the caption, we're going back to the Indian today. What we're going to do is put the bottom half of the engine in, probably put the forks in, the swinging arm in, who knows, maybe mud guards. Anyway, this is going to be part one of the reconstruction. First thing we're going to have to do is put the bearing races back into the frame. But I wanted to show you something first on these. This here is your average outer bearing race that you would find in the steering head of the frame. These are the ones you knock out and replace. And as you can see, it's just a hardened steel circle with a base, so the balls run in that. And most of you will have seen one like that. Now of course, for some reason Royal Enfield didn't like that. There's a Royal Enfield one. So we've got the same race for the balls to go in, but as you can see here, you see the cross section of it, that goes all the way down at the frame. There's even a taper in the top of the frame, so that's a Royal Enfield one. So if you lose one of these, you can't just rummage around and find this type to fit, because it just won't go in. And in fact, you'll see this is brand new. It's brand new because somewhere in the workshop are the two original ones that came out the frame that I've lost. But there you go. So let's bang those in. So here's where the bottom race goes, into the headstock. I don't know if you can make it out there, but there's the taper, and then there's the normal wall. So that goes in like thus. Now, as we mentioned before, you can press these in, you can put a long bolt through and pull them in, or you can use a suitable sized drift and, excuse me, a nice big hammer, get them set up straight. And in it goes. So I'll knock the next one in, and then we'll show you a little dodge about putting the engine in the frame, or in actual fact the frame on the engine. Now I'm going to start by showing you the rear engine mounts. As we know, Enfield engine and gearbox is actually separate, but it bolts onto the back of the engine with these 4 studs. I've got some nuts coming for these. The Interceptors have another plate on the back here, but the earlier models didn't. Now this bolts into the back half of the frame and the front half of the frame, but there's no cradle underneath. And here are the rear engine mounting plates. Now you see this lug here, well it's not a lug actually, it's a little L plate on each side. That's the stop for the centre stand, and the centre stand is bolted through there. Now these plates go on, the rear part is on a slot, and then the front part goes through on the engine like that. Come on. There we go. And then these get tightened up into the slot. Like that. And this part bolts into the curve of the back of the frame. Now let me pull you out and I'll explain what I was talking about with a dodge. Now I've just got it standing on a couple of blocks here just to give me some clearance underneath. But if you have the centre stand on here, the centre stand will remain in place even with the engine out of the frame, because it's in these plates, and these plates are nice and firmly mounted up. Now what you can do is either for taking the engine out or putting it in, it's particularly handy. Say you just want to paint the bike, you don't want to really touch the engine at all, but what you need of course is to take the engine out. With most bikes of course you've got to mess around and get the engine out of the frame, and then you've got to put it back in the frame when the frame's all nicely painted. But with the Enfield, what you can do is, imagine the frame is on this with the wheels and everything. You put down the centre stand and then you put a jack under the front. It's nice and flat piece there. And what you can do then is, with the centre stand in, the rear wheel's clear of the floor. You take the rear wheel out. Then you jack your jack up a little bit so the front wheel is clear. Take your front wheel out, take your forks out, take all the bits and pieces off the frame, and then you can actually, because there's no bottom to the frame, just with a little, as our Arkwright again would say, just jiggle it a little bit, you can actually lift the frame off and leave the engine standing there on the centre stand and the jack. And you can do this actually with the head and barrels on. It'll all come off. Believe me, I've done it. Now we're going to put the frame on like that, and I'll tell you there's going to be a lot of jiggling, because it's one of those things that it's like putting a B50 in the oiling frame. It will go in, but it's got to be just right, and if you don't get it just right it'll stick and then you've got to get it off. So let's get the frame up and we'll manoeuvre the frame onto here and you can see what I mean. Alright, here we go. So if you just imagine that this is standing on the centre stand and this little jack would be exactly the same, just be up here. So you're going to need the engine plates ready and the bolts. The two bolts that go through, one being the hex bolt for the footrests. There are hex holes in the engine plates so this doesn't twist, and then the footrests themselves have hex fittings so that holds everything right. And a long 3/8 bolt. Now these also have some spacing pieces. One is a 1/4 inch shorter than the other. So this one goes for the hex bolt, and actually they've got different size holes through them so you can't really mess them up. This one and a shorter one are for the 3/8 bolt that goes through the back, so you need them ready. Now the first thing we're going to do is put the engine plates on. And you can see from the engine plate that where the frame goes in is actually a good way off from the engine block. So that gives us some more space. So we'll pop these in. These are 5/16. And we'll put the nuts on so that the plates don't move around too much while we're getting things into position. Okay, so I think we're all about ready. Now another useful thing is to just pop a little bit of wood in there just to spring the frame a little bit. Don't forget it's 60-year-old, and even if it's only just been standing in a shed, it's got the weight of the engine and all the rest of it in it, so it probably isn't exactly the way it was made. Now then, see if I can remember how this goes together. Which end goes first? Is it front end in first? Yes, front end in first. This is where you could do with an assistant. But anyway, let's get the... Oops. There we go. It's a bit like putting a B50 engine into the oiling frame. You know it'll go, but there's barely any space. There we go. So that goes through in there. Now then, what you have got to be careful of here is the equivalent of this little spacer is actually welded onto the frame on this side. And if you remember, there was those two little L pieces on the engine plates for the to be stops for the centre stand. Well, if you get that spacing piece underneath there, it won't come up. So then you've got to take the front off again and all the rest of it. So let's see if we can get. We're going to put the hex one in first. Now, of course, this is one of those things where you've got to be ready with the spacer, and so you can't push the bolt through too far. Okay. That's that one going in. I'm getting all dirty. So let's put this one. We're going to put this one in now, so that goes in. Then the short spacer. Then the long spacing piece. Then I brought a little bit of box under here for that. Give this little bit of a bump through. Come on now. See, this is the real stuff. Don't need any bloopers or outtakes, because we just see it all as it happens. Now, why isn't that going through there? That's up against metal. Come on now. Tell you what we'll do. Let's tighten this front up, and perhaps that'll pull things around a little. Had that happen before, think you're miles out, and actually you tighten something up and suddenly everything comes back into line. I'm not going to actually tighten up the front frame. I'm going to leave that to give us a little bit of movement, or at least it's sort of running truer in the two holes. Right. There we go. There we go. And now the other side. And this one. I can see it there, so we must be very close. So anyway, I'll get that in there. We take our little bit of wood out now. And there you go, you see? Frame on the engine. And as I say, this could be just standing there, ready for everything else to go in. So what we're going to do next is the front end. I was going to put the swinging arm in, but as I got the bits together, I realised I hadn't got the little dust seals, so I'm going to have to order them, which means they've got to come from Hitchcock's. So we'll put the yokes in, rebuild the forks, put the forks in. I might put the front mud guard on. We'll pick this up onto a box so we've got space for wheels and go from there. But anyway, as I say, there's that little thing with the engine that goes in without any bother at all. Well, minor bother. Alright, we're going to put bottom yoke and stem in and the top yoke. Before you do that, there are 3 things you want to check just for the benefit of your blood pressure. With the Japanese bikes, and possibly other European ones, I can't remember, you would put the bottom yoke in with the stem in, and then there's a separate top race that goes on, and then a holding nut. Then you can put the bottom yoke on and everything's nice and easy. Generally with a British bike, what you're going to be juggling with is the bottom yoke with its stem and the top yoke, which has the race built into it, all together, and then putting a clamping nut on. So the big thing to do is to make sure it all will go together easily before you start. So here's the bottom yoke with the stem. Number 1, you've got to make sure that it fits in there nice and easily. Right? You don't want it to be tight as it goes on. Second thing you want to know is that the nut is going to screw on there easily. Just like that. And finally, you want to know that that is going to go in there nice and easily as well. Because there's nothing worse than having the bottom yoke in. And don't forget, if this was a normal Enfield with a full casquette, you're juggling this whole thing down, you've got your balls in, because you put grease in there to hold the balls, and suddenly you can't get that down on the stem, or you've got it on the stem and this won't go in, or it won't start to thread. So just those minor precautions are very good. So plenty of grease in this. You want to grease all the races, but plenty in this one and plenty in this one, because they're going to be holding the balls. 1/4 inch balls in this case, 19 to each race. So you don't want them falling out. So let me zoom you in. I'll put the balls on and then we'll fit this together. I'll put the ball bearings in, but I just want to mention something about ball bearings. There should be a gap. I don't know if you can see it there. This is a spoke, it's about 1/8 of an inch. It just goes in there. Right? So when you put your balls in, didn't sound quite right. When you've got the balls bearings in, don't be worried if there's a gap. There's got to be a gap. These balls have got to be able to rotate in the races in order for them to act as a bearing. Otherwise, if they were just shoulder to shoulder so they couldn't move, all you would have is 2 bearing surfaces. It would just be this surface pressing against the race, but you want the surface to be constantly changing by the balls rotating in there. So, as I say, when you've got them all in, there should be a gap. Don't let it put you off. Right, let me zoom you out. Let's see if we can get this put together. Now then, get everything to hand. I've got a socket in my pocket. The big nut's there. Everything's greased up. So we put the bottom in. Find its way through the top hole. And of course you've got to hold that in place. Then on goes that. Like that. And hopefully in goes that and screws on. There it goes. And then we can finish it off. Whoops, must have been just a tight spot there, look. was I saying earlier about bloopers? I'll tell you what this could be catching on. There's a, instead of having a pinch bolt, there's actually a little pair of sort of wedges inside that the bolt that goes in at an angle pull together to grip the stem. So they sometimes stick out a little bit. And this is why, as I say, you've got to have everything ready to hand, because you can't be just letting go of this to walk off to get something. There we go. No play, but easy movement. So there's the yolks in. Now the next thing we're going to have to fit in are, what have I done with them? There they are. These things. There's a little chrome piece that goes in the top, and then we're going to put the bolts in, and then when they're in we can put the forks in. So let's get ourselves ready for that.